Chapter 583. In his impression, other than a bit of affection between family members, there was no friendship between other relationships. In the cultivation world, most people used each other. Ever since he started cultivating devil skills, he had become more and more selfish. His personality had gradually become cold, and he didn't believe in these things. However, what happened today had given him too much shock. Especially the heroic act of Old Six sacrificing himself to lure the enemy. It made his cold heart's blood boil. In this sect, although they weren't father and son, they were better than real father and son. Although they weren't brothers, they were better than real brothers. It was rare to see someone risking their life for a brother. It stirred people's hearts. The cruel sounds of fighting in the distance were intense. It was unknown how many people Old Six was facing right now. The straightforward Old Seven looked like a careless, boorish person. But at this moment, he was crying like a child and tightly covering his mouth. Old Five closed his eyes and forcefully pressed the back of his head against the soil. Tears silently slid down his face. Man who had already bitten his lips until they bled. Hearing the movements outside, Yan Juexing looked at the three martial brothers and pursed his lips into a line. The muscles on his face twitched, and he almost couldn't control his emotions. This kind of situation had never happened before, not to mention after cultivating demonic arts. Whoosh whoosh. Another wave of fast-flying sounds swept past above their heads. Then there was no more movement. Only the sounds of fighting came from the distance. This was probably the last wave. Those who should go had all gone. From today onwards, Old Two and Old Six's grudge is my grudge. Yan Juexing's words jumped out one by one. His eyes were abnormally cold. If we don't leave now, when will we? Man who shouted in a low voice, and decisively pushed the others out. The four of them quickly fled. The area below where the whistling arrows had come from had already been thrown into chaos. In just a few moments, several thousand people had charged over, and rushed into the forest below like a swarm of bees. That scene was very lively. A large patch of the towering ancient trees had already fallen. Eldest martial uncle, stop the people from world commerce. Block the others for me. It's me. Watch carefully before you act. One side didn't want to let the other side take the lead, while the other side wanted to be first. The people who arrived first immediately helped out. The people who came later did not understand the situation at all. When they heard their fellow disciples calling out to them, they did not hesitate to help out. As a result, the battle became more and more intense. It had already become a chaotic battle. Seeing their fellow disciples fall one by one, everyone's eyes turned red with killing intent. As long as someone brushed past him, he would only recognize the clothes and not the person. Letting go would be a killing move. The most unlucky ones were the people from the World Commerce Association. Although they had a lot of people, they were besieged by the various powers. Because World Commerce had taken the initiative to stop the others. When those people's fellow sect members rushed over and saw their own people fighting with World Commerce, they didn't know who Yan Juexing was and thought that World Commerce had already captured him. They had come here to snatch people, so there was no need for words. Fight! When the other powers rushed over and saw that almost everyone was attacking World Commerce, they also thought that World Commerce had succeeded. Everyone is fighting for people. Let's fight for them too. Fight! Those who came later saw that their fellow disciples were in such a state. How could they just stand by and watch? Helping their fellow disciples fight was definitely not wrong. Fight! Thus, the scene was like a rolling snowball as everyone threw caution to the wind. Although most people didn't know what was going on, it was the general trend. Occasionally, there would be some clear-headed people who wanted to stop, but they couldn't. If you didn't fight, someone would fight. If you wanted to fly up to the sky, there would immediately be a few people who would beat you down. Even a clay figurine had a temper. At this stage, if they didn't fight, they would be beaten. Other than fighting, what other choice did they have? Thousands of people fought together in a chaotic battle. It was a spectacular scene. Broken limbs were everywhere on the ground and blood dyed the forest. Behind them, there were still large numbers of people from the various powers, rushing over to help. Zhang Zuanxing led several hundred people. From the start, he was the target of the various powers' attacks. At this time, he had already lost most of them, He could be said to be riddled with wounds. Although it wasn't a big deal, he had been harassed by all sorts of people. As for number 6, who was previously surrounded, no one knew where he was. He already had no time to care about himself, so why would he care about others? It was more like he didn't want his life anymore. Clang, clang, clang. Ah, I'll fight you to the death. Ha, save me. The various lights and colors released by the artifacts were dazzling. Intense crashing sounds and miserable cries rang out everywhere. It didn't seem to stop. Right now, number 6 was also fighting in the chaotic battle. With his decent cultivation, he was fine. However, he also suffered many small injuries. The main reason was that the attacks were too concentrated. His clothes had become tattered. Blood splattered everywhere, covering his body. His face was already a mess. Who could recognize him? Actually, at this stage, with so many people coming and going, it was hard to tell who he was. Who could tell who he was? Yan Juexing? There were a few people present who had seen Yan Juexing before. Even if they knew number 6, who could tell him apart with his current appearance? They didn't have the time to do so. Flying swords and all kinds of magic weapons flew up like rabbits and fell like a cuckoo. The messy explosions made their ears buzz, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Number 6 was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. What are they doing? Forget it. I thought I was dead for sure. Since I have a chance to escape, why stay here? Number 6 took the opportunity to size up the situation. He suddenly leaped up and saw the people fighting in the air, taking the opportunity to launch a few sword astral slashes. In an instant, 5 or 6 people attacked him, forcing him back. The moment he landed, the messy attacks came again. He drew his sword and quickly pointed it in all directions. Chaotic sword chi burst out and blocked the attacks. Since he couldn't get out from the top, he gritted his teeth and fought towards the outside. From the attacks just now, he could tell that the people fighting on the top had higher cultivation. It was too difficult to get out from the top. It was impossible for a single person to deal with so many experts. It was safer to rely on his own cultivation to get out from the side. On the Hungduan mountain range, at the border of the Redbud Kingdom, a group of spirit-severing experts heard the rumbling sounds of battle from afar. From the sounds of it, it seemed like the battle had reached its climax. They didn't know what was going on. The reason why everyone was here was to put pressure on the lords of the other factions and prevent them from interfering. At this time, Yin Baikong was calm and composed. He squinted his eyes as he stared at the people rushing in from all directions. There was a hint of arrogance on his face. Most of these people were disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. They had never gathered like this before. This was the first time they had displayed their strength so valiantly. However, good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days, to be used in a single moment. If they didn't use it now, when would they? As more and more people arrived at the World Commerce Association, the expressions of many soul formation experts changed. Usually, people only knew that the World Commerce Chamber was powerful and influential. Now that there was an endless stream of people rushing over, it gave them a great visual shock. The World Commerce was indeed very powerful. Everyone knew that this was only the people who came from nearby. Those who came from further away should still be behind, and no one knew how many there were. Beside Yin Baikong, Hu Changsho's eyes flickered. Suddenly, both of them turned around at the same time. Qi Jiujuan, Ouyangda, and Pei Fong were the same. Pei Fong, who had lost a hand, laughed gloatingly. Bing Qingzi is here. The three of them looked at each other. They were somewhat excited, but there was no need to say anything. No matter how high Bing Qingzi's cultivation was, how could he be a match for so many soul formation experts? Once Bing Qingzi died, the three of them would benefit the most from this. Xiao, a high-speed flying sound that could only be produced by a soul formation final stage expert, and above could be heard. All the soul formation experts turned around to look. Another soul formation final stage expert was coming from that direction. Who else could it be other than Bing Qingzi? The 5 soul formation final stage experts shot into the sky at the same time, forming a line to block the incoming person's path. Yin Baikong was the first to speak. Brother Bing, why are you in such a hurry? We have been waiting for you for a long time. Please stop for a chat. His chances of winning were the highest, so how could he let Bing Qingzi go now? He naturally had to find a reason to make Bing Qingzi stay. Moreover, the other four were on his side, so there was no need to be afraid of Bing Qingzi. Get out of my way. Before the person arrived, a wave of angry roars was the first to approach. As far as Chu Tian could see, there was a white dot rapidly approaching. Pei Fong, who had a broken palm, cackled. Bing Qingzi, if you know what's good for you, then stop. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Bing Qingzi arrived at this distance in an instant, but he did not show any signs of stopping. Their expressions changed. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi, who was flying towards them, shouted, "Profoundine palm!" His palms flew towards them like dancing butterflies. A monstrous wave surged, and the temperature in the air instantly dropped below the freezing point. The few of them turned pale with fright. They saw a sky full of transparent palm shadows rushing towards them. Each palm shadow was as big as a dinner table, and there were at least 300 to 400 of them. In an instant, they arrived in front of the 5 of them. The 5 of them were startled. They did not expect Bing Qingzi to attack them without any warning. There were 5 of them here. Wasn't he a little too daring? Because they had underestimated Bing Qingzi's determination, the 5 of them were not prepared to attack. They were all so scared that they immediately teleported away. What a joke! Bing Qingzi's strength was beyond doubt. Other than Wen Lanfeng, it was him. Moreover, this profoundine palm was extremely insidious. It was a famous killer move that Bing Qingzi had cultivated by sitting on the Great Snow Mountain all year round and absorbing the cold air for thousands of years. Every time he used it, the cold poison in his body would be reduced. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In short, it was very powerful. If they were hit by 1 or 2 palms, the 5 of them would probably have to go home to recuperate for a month or 2. How could they still fight here? The palm shadows disappeared, but the cold air was still there. Suddenly, there was a short burst of snowflakes floating in the clear sky, which looked colorful under the refraction of the sun. As soon as the 5 of them dodged, they saw Bing Qingzi rushing past them in a blur. Behind him was a huge white python that was as thick as a water bucket. Someone below exclaimed, "It's the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon. Bing Qingzi even brought it here." Chapter 584. Not far from the Stone Jade City branch, on a mountaintop that wasn't too high, Yu Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. Occasionally, there was smoke curling up from chimneys in the mountains, not sure if it was a village or a hunter's house. Looking to the north, the outline of the entire capital of ACI could be seen. It was a scene of a vast land. Both Guan Zhongkai and Yulan stood behind him. They didn't know what he was thinking. They stood motionless for a long time. The two didn't dare to disturb him. They only secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission while exchanging glances. From time to time, there were cultivators flying past in the sky. This kind of frequent passing rate was rarely seen. They didn't know what urgent matter it was. It was estimated that the cultivators flying across the sky wouldn't notice the 3 people on the top of the mountain. However, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked up from time to time. Say, why do the cultivators who fly freely in the sky want to dominate the mortals who work hard on the earth? Yu Qianqiu suddenly waved his hand and pointed to the bustling capital in the distance and asked. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't know why he asked this, but this question was really difficult to answer. A person's grandmaster, a person's master, they were all lords. How could they make a rash judgment? But it was not good to not answer. Guan Zhongkai took a step forward and said with a smile, "Mortals are so ignorant. How can they be qualified to dominate the world? We cultivators move freely in the world. Our vision is broad. We are naturally qualified to dominate them." Yulan also stepped forward and said, "With senior's cultivation, sooner or later, you will also become a lord. There is no doubt about this." Yu Qianqiu looked around and asked again, "When did the rule that cultivators can't interfere in the affairs of the secular world appear?" The 2 of them were startled at the same time. They looked at each other questioningly. They both shook their heads slightly. Guan Zhongkai replied, "This rule has been around for a long time. We really don't know when it actually appeared. Why does Senior ask this? Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Do you think everyone follows this rule? Of course, Guan Zhongkai said with certainty. Cultivators in the cultivation world basically don't interfere with worldly affairs. Everyone knows this. Then why are there still lords in each country? Take your grandmaster, Yin Baikong, and your master, Shengguan Taiping for example. Aren't they meddling in worldly affairs? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhongkai was speechless. Even Yulan gave him a look and smiled. This is also for the good of the mortals in the secular world. As long as there are lords in each country, there won't be any chaos. Otherwise, when mortals fight for power and profit, how can there not be conflicts in hundreds of countries? I'm afraid there will be wars every day, and the mortals will be the ones suffering. Yes. That's the logic. Guan Zhongkai echoed. As far as I know, once a country's lord is annihilated by another country's lord, it's the start of a secular war. Start annexing the territories of the losers. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at the two of them, saying, because of this, almost every lord is pressuring the emperors of the secular world to maintain a state of war all year round in preparation for annexing territories. This, Yulan smiled bitterly. It's been like this for countless years. Senior, why do you worry about these mortals? Guan Zhongkai also nodded. Yes. Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the two of them and continued. Because the countries maintain a state of war all year round. The corvée labor and heavy taxes make the people suffer year after year. Even if they want to rebel, they will never be able to do so because of the interference of the cultivation world. Because the nobles of the various countries have the support of the cultivation world, they are not afraid of their power being overthrown. They take the opportunity to act recklessly and bully the common people. When a regime is rotten and can't take it anymore, it should be overthrown. This is the normal rule. The forceful interference of the cultivation world is against the natural order. The two of them were stunned at the same time and did not know what to say. Yu Qianqiu's words had subverted their common sense. Yulan asked tentatively, Senior, what do you mean? Hee, you don't have to be surprised. I was just saying. Yu Qianqiu smiled and turned around. There was no point in saying this to them. He narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flickered in his eyes as he examined the world again. During this period of time, he had seen too many hardships of the people's lives. Previously, he was limited by the geographical environment and thought that it was just a problem of the governance of a certain country. Who would have thought that after visiting so many countries, almost all of them were like this? He still could not understand why the common people did not rebel when they were forced to this point. While he was puzzled, he thought of the cultivation world, a colossus that mortals could not overthrow. The lords behind every country were the top experts of the cultivation world. Furthermore, these experts had great influence in the cultivation world. Mortals had no way of resisting at all. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan came to a realization, so he was just saying it casually. They thought that this Senior Niu had gone crazy. Why did he have to talk about mortals? His train of thought was too jumpy. The two of them could not keep up. Senior, shouldn't we make a move? Guan Zhongkai asked. There's no rush. It's too late. It won't be too late to leave tomorrow, Yu Qianqiu said and flew towards the Jade City branch. It's too late? The two of them looked at the sun above them. It was just past noon. Was it considered too late? What kind of logic was this? The two of them looked at each other helplessly. They were used to seeing Niu Yud's crazy actions along the way. They were not surprised at all. They quickly followed him. When they arrived at the inner hall of the branch, Yu Qianqiu waved to the two of them and said, I want to sleep. Don't let anyone disturb me without my permission. The two of them were speechless again. They could only obey. This was the first time they saw an expert who liked to sleep. On the flying artifact he often slept soundly. What a freak. After the two of them left, Yu Qianqiu stared at Yin Baikong's portrait in the main hall. Although he had sparred with Yin Baikong in Dian Kingdom, the two of them had never met. However, from this portrait, Yin Baikong looked like a proper person. He had a sage-like demeanor. Humph. He snorted coldly and returned to the room he had prepared for himself. Then he disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu and Zhang Peng were summoned. Zhang Peng had been assigned by Yu Qianqiu to be Guan Yu's adjutant. He was to assist Guan Yu in everything. After greeting each other, Yu Qianqiu did not waste any time. He directly asked, Zhang Peng, what's the cultivation level of the members in the military camp? Zhang Peng replied, there are around 3,000 in the early stage of tribulation passing, and 3,000 in the nascent soul stage. There are also around 3,000 who have reached the core formation stage. Yu Qianqiu gave Guan Yu a questioning look. Guan Yu nodded, indicating that it was not bad. Zhang Peng, I have a mission for you this time. Are you confident that you can complete it? Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yes. Zhang Peng became excited. He could not help but ask, Master, what mission? Is it the same as last time? Yu Qianqiu nodded. Not bad, but the scale will be much larger than last time. Then, he turned to Guan Yu and smiled. Yunchang, this guy lacks the experience of commanding battles in the cultivation world. This time, I'll let him come up with the battle plan. What do you think? Okay. Guan Yu agreed. There was an indescribable loneliness in his tone. Actually, he knew that ever since he publicly disobeyed boss's orders, the relationship between the two of them was not as good as before. Although boss still had a polite smile on his face, the fact that he suddenly appointed Zhang Peng as his adjutant was already a very deep meaning. In particular, there were a few regiment commanders who held great power in the military camp. Sometimes, they were more obedient to Zhang Peng than to him. Guan Yu also knew in his heart that these commanders were people that boss would contact in secret. These regiment commanders' attitudes were ambiguous, but boss's shadow was actually behind them. Before long, he would have to retreat behind the scenes, and the position of chief instructor would be given to Zhang Peng sooner or later. Because he understood this, he started to give up power to Zhang Peng. Intentionally or unintentionally, he highlighted Zhang Peng's position in the military. There was no need to fight for anything. In Utopia, no one could win against boss. Everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu was the leader of the entire Utopia. Zhang Peng could hear the loneliness in Guan Yu's tone. But he was not an idiot. No matter how rash a general who was once good at war looked, he would not be an idiot. Otherwise, how could he always win battles? Although his master did not say anything about his master suddenly assigning him to be Guan Yu's adjutant, he was well aware of his master's intentions after considering the entire sequence of events. Master, I really do not have enough experience. I'm afraid I still need the chief instructor's guidance, Zhang Peng said sincerely and humbly. Guan Yu smiled and said, you can do it. In terms of arranging troops, you are actually better than me. Yu Qianqiu silently looked at Guan Yu and sighed in his heart. It was good that they were both smart people. Otherwise, they would fall out with each other. It was good for everyone from start to finish. Originally, when Guan Yu publicly disobeyed his orders, he wanted to directly replace Guan Yu. There was no room for discussion. It would be terrible if he publicly disobeyed orders on the battlefield. However, Guan Yu's position in the army was not low. He was the chief instructor of all the team members. All the team members were trained by him. If he were to directly replace him, the impact would be too great. The morale of the army would be unstable. Furthermore, it would be difficult to find a suitable person to take over. Thus, he threw Zhang Peng over to be the adjutant to learn. He believed that Zhang Peng, who had rich experience in leading troops, would be able to take on the role in the future. From the looks of it, everyone knew what to do. That was good. Otherwise, he would have to use ruthless methods to cleanse them. It's decided. Zhang Peng will lead the organization. If there are any inadequacies, Yunchang will give you more pointers. Yu Qianqiu changed the topic and said in a deep voice, gather everyone and stand by. Wait for my news. Yes. The two of them accepted the order in unison. However, Zhang Peng was a little confused and reminded, Master, won't it be too conspicuous for so many people to go out at once? He had followed them outside and knew how powerful those soul formation experts were. If they were discovered, it would be troublesome if they couldn't retreat in time. Knowing his concern, Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, the looting outside is in full swing. This is the time when our defense is at its weakest. This is the best time to make a move. With that said, he disappeared. Chapter 585. Seeing that even the snow dragon had appeared, everyone could imagine that Bing Qingzi must have been forced into a corner. Everyone was even more certain about Yin Juexing. Someone clicked his tongue and said, Bing Qingzi has even taken out his trump card. Looks like we have to save Yin Juexing. Seeing Bing Qingzi pass through, the 5 spirit-severing stage experts were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed. Yin Baikong shouted angrily, Bing Qingzi, don't go. Without needing to say anything, the 5 figures flashed and chased after Bing Qingzi. The group of people standing on the treetop of the Hengduan mountain range rubbed their palms together. If the 6 of them were to fight, it would be a good show. Someone shouted, let's go and have a look. In an instant, a group of spirit-severing stage experts flashed into the sky and chased after them. Shuijiao stopped them. Bing Qingzi shouted without turning his head, and continued to fly rapidly. Moo! A sound that sounded like a cow's moo resounded through the sky. The snow dragon swayed its body and turned around in the air. Its agility in the air was like that of a dragon. The snow-white shining armor shuttled back and forth in the air so fast that people could not see its figure clearly. It was like a soaring dragon in the sky. In an instant, it hovered in the air and stared at the people chasing after it with its bright red eyes. Its crystal-clear antler-like horns reflected magnificent colors under the sunlight. Moo! The sound reverberated through the sky again. A cloud of white miasma burst out from its horns. In the blink of an eye, it covered the sky and spun rapidly in the air. The snow dragon opened its bloody mouth and stuck out its tongue, blowing out a breath of cold air. The thick white miasma suddenly condensed into ice blades and swept towards the people chasing after it. Others might be afraid of it, but the 5 spirit-severing stage experts were not afraid of it. A transparent protective aura quickly appeared on its body, and it did not slow down. No matter how the ice blades slashed on it, it forcibly passed through them. It was very powerful. The snow dragon had received its master's order. It would not give up after failing in one attack. It swung its long tail and fearlessly charged towards the 5 people. Accompanied by the wind and clouds, its speed was much faster than when it was flying with Bing Qingzi. Flying dragon in the sky, white dragon phantom. Its momentum was really amazing. The group of people chasing them from afar quickly stopped. He was afraid that this beast would not understand and start fighting with him. It was better to let the 5 experts deal with it first. Insolent beast, Qi Jiujuan flew at the front and bore the brunt of the attack. With a loud shout, the Junlin Qi suddenly appeared in his hand. A golden light burst out, and he slammed it at the snow dragon. Dang! The Junlin Qi and the snow flood dragon's crystal clear horn collided and sent Qi Jiujuan flying several hundred meters away. However, the snow flood dragon was also slammed down nearly 100 meters, but in the blink of an eye, it flashed back. The other 4 were startled and became serious. They took out their spiritual treasures. Obviously, they didn't expect this beast to be so ferocious. Qi Jiujuan's Junlin ruler was very powerful, and had always been very powerful. Unexpectedly, Qi Jiujuan seemed to be slightly inferior in terms of strength. As expected of a spiritual beast of heaven and earth, the long white shadow did not stop, and directly pounced at the other 4 people. From the looks of it, it still wanted to fight against 4 people? The 4 people were a little annoyed. 4 late-stage spirit-severing experts could not deal with the spiritual beast. If this news spread out, wouldn't they die of laughter? Beast, you're courting death. 100 blade cut. Pei Fong angrily shouted. The snow flood dragon actually charged at him. It was a little suspicious that he had lost an arm. Otherwise, why would it pick him who was standing in the middle? The blue beauty demon blade in his left hand turned into a phantom. Hundreds of blue blade shadows made shio-shio sounds and fiercely slashed at the head of the snow flood dragon. The other 3 people were not idle either. Their figures flashed quickly, as if they were dragons in the sky. 2 rainbow-like sword shadows pierced the body of the snow flood dragon like lightning, splashing bright sparks in broad daylight. Qi Jiujuan, who flashed over, held the Junlin Qi with both hands, and once again smashed at the head of the snow flood dragon. Bang! A very loud sound was heard. Moo! Another deafening bull's moo resounded. However, this time there was a miserable sound. That's right. 5 late-stage spirit-severing experts were working together to deal with a snow flood dragon that was only equivalent to a mid-stage spirit-severing expert. It would be strange if it could still get away with it. However, this snow flood dragon's skin was really thick. At the very least, no wounds could be seen from its appearance. Just as the snow flood dragon's body fell down, a phantom chased after it. It was Oyangda. His deadly claws had already protected his arms and palms. 2 sinister pitch-black claws locked onto the tail of the snow flood dragon with a gotcha sound. What are you guys hesitating for? Stop being Qingzi! Oyangda roared. He grabbed the tail of the falling snow flood dragon and quickly spun it. Such a thick and long snow flood dragon was actually spun like a windmill by him. The 4 people were slightly startled. Then, without hesitation, they flashed away and continued to chase after Bing Qingzi. The snow flood dragon, which was tens of meters long and as thick as a water bucket, spun into a big white wheel with a hoo-hoo sound. Oyangda let out a breath and let out a high sound. Then he swung the snow flood dragon and smashed it downwards. A white shadow was thrown into the deep mountains while spinning. Soon after, a pile of trees fell down, followed by a loud pung sound. Oyangda glanced down and coldly snorted, "Reckless beast." Then, he quickly chased after the few people in front. This happened in just a few moments, but the group of people behind looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know whether this spiritual beast was dead or not. However, since it was attacked by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it died, it wouldn't die in vain. The group of people flew up into the sky and sized up the motionless white body in the pit. All of them revealed a look of pity. After being beaten up by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it didn't die, it would be crippled. Now they didn't have time to pay attention to it. Everyone glanced at it and then flashed away. Bing Qingzi also heard the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. A trace of heartache flashed across his face. However, his expression turned ruthless, and he didn't slow down. With the obstruction of the snow flood dragon, it was impossible for the people behind to catch up to him. This allowed him to arrive in advance and save Yan Juexing and his disciples, which was very advantageous for him. The battle in front was very intense, and they could already see it. Man Hu and the other 3, who were fleeing in the mountain forest, heard the mooing sound of a cow. 3 of the 4 people stopped. Yan Juexing, who rushed to the front, stopped and said in surprise, "Everyone, let's go. What happened to you guys?" "Is that the cry of the snow flood dragon?" Old 5 said in disbelief. "Because the snow flood dragon never came down from the snowy mountain. How could it appear here?" "It's Master. Master has arrived. Master has brought the snow flood dragon down the mountain." Old 7 couldn't help but cheer. Yan Juexing looked at Man Hu with an inquiring gaze. The latter nodded seriously and said, "Yes, it should be Master." Just as he finished speaking, they heard a rapid loud sound coming from the sky in front, followed by the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. The expressions of the 4 changed. Before they could calm down, they felt a violent vibration coming from under their feet. A pung sound came from the forest in front of them. "Let's go and take a look." Man Hu waved his hand, and the 3 immediately followed. When they arrived at the scene of the accident, they saw the forest had collapsed, and there was a deep pit in the ground. The few of them surrounded the pit and saw the snow flood dragon shaking its head. Its chin was covered in blood, and it was obviously injured. "Snow flood dragon, what happened to you?" Old 7 was the first to jump down and touched the snow flood dragon's head. The snow flood dragon probably heard Old 7's voice and let out a mooing sound in pain. Its voice lacked confidence. It was still shaking its head. It seemed to be dizzy from the spinning and had not recovered. The few of them jumped down. Only Yan Juexing was speechless as he looked at the big guy below. This was because he had never seen such a huge python with a horn on its head. Could it still be considered a snake? Under the concern of the few of them, the snow flood dragon stopped shaking its head after a while. Its red eyes began to spin. Looking at the 4 of them, it intimately stuck out its tongue and licked them. However, When it saw Yan Juexing above, it immediately revealed hostility. It slightly tightened its upper body and seemed to be about to attack. "He's one of us." Old 7 patted its head, and the snow flood dragon calmed down. "Where's Master?" Man Who frowned and asked. The snow flood dragon was shocked and seemed to remember its master. It jumped out of the pit and let out a mooing sound to the few of them below. When the 4 of them flew out, they saw the snow flood dragon stretching its body and rode on it without hesitation. Man Who waved to Yan Juexing and said, "Young Palace Master, come up." Yan Juexing was stunned. Without hesitation, he rode on the snow flood dragon. Man Who patted the snow flood dragon's body, and the snow flood dragon shot into the sky with the few of them. In the blink of an eye, it carried the few of them and flew high up in the sky. Hearing this, Yan Juexing was secretly shocked. This white python with a long horn on its head was actually flying faster than them, while carrying 4 people on its back. Could this be the legendary spirit beast? Bing Qingzi, who was flying at high speed, was slightly stunned. He saw hundreds of early divine transformation realm cultivators fighting in the sky ahead. What's the meaning of this? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Bing Qingzi immediately thought of a possibility. Yan Juexing had already fallen into their hands, and everyone was fighting over him. Blacking palm. Bing Qingzi rushed over and in a rage, he waved his palm at the group of people. Hundreds of palm shadows shot out with a boom. Bang bang bang. Ah! The group of people who were in a killing frenzy were instantly hit by the palm shadows. Dozens of people dizzily fell down. Bing Qingzi is here. Someone shouted. Actually, there was no need to remind them. Those who were not hit were also scared witless by the might of the blacking palm. They had long stopped fighting, and all of them teleported far away. The battered and exhausted Sikongju stood in the sky not far away with his sword in hand. This time, the World Commerce Company had suffered a huge loss. Even he himself had almost lost his life. He had never been in such a chaotic battle before. It seemed that everyone was more interested in attacking the World Commerce Company's people. They were very glad that they could last until now. Looking at the furious Bing Qingzi, Sikongju's battered and exhausted face was filled with uncertainty. He thought to himself, where are Master and the others? Bing Qingzi came from that direction. Could it be that Master and so many people couldn't stop Bing Qingzi? Chapter 586. The people who were fighting below were also startled by the shout of Bing Qingzi is here. They all subconsciously stopped fighting. They looked up dumbfoundedly and saw dozens of early spirit-severing realm experts fall down with a plop sound. The group of people immediately looked at the white-robed angry old man with great reverence. Bing Qingzi, late spirit-severing realm expert. Master, Grandmaster. A mess of greetings sounded, and many people rushed towards those early spirit-severing realm experts who fell down. Those who fell down were the seniors of many people's sect. How could they not show their concern? The dozens of spirit-severing realm experts who fell down were usually high and mighty, but now, their bodies were covered with a layer of frost, and they kept trembling and their teeth were chattering. Even the people who went to help them couldn't help but shiver when their hands touched them. So cold. Fortunately, these people were spirit-severing realm experts with high cultivation and could withstand it. If it was someone weaker, they would have been frozen into a popsicle and died after being hit by Bing Qingzi's darking palm. One could imagine that Bing Qingzi's darking palm was not a joke. Just a moment ago, it was still very lively, but now it was completely silent. Bing Qingzi looked at the bloody scene below, and his eyebrows kept trembling. He couldn't see his disciple or Yan Juexing. A majestic killing intent surged out from his body, scaring the group of people who were trembling with fear and prepared to escape. Master! Suddenly, a voice that Bing Qingzi was very familiar with sounded. A guy covered in blood rushed up and saluted him, but he couldn't see his face clearly. However, Bing Qingzi recognized him immediately and shouted excitedly, "Old Six, you are still alive!" That's right. It was Old Six who couldn't get out after rushing for a long time. Seeing his master suddenly appear, he was a little disbelieving. When he came to his senses, he immediately rushed up to greet his master. He, disciple is very lucky and won't die. Old Six, whose face was covered in blood, grinned and revealed his white teeth. He was a little happy. Even he didn't expect that he could survive. Now that his master was here, he didn't have to be afraid. Seeing his disciple's tattered clothes and bloodied body, Bing Qingzi nodded his head vigorously. One could imagine how difficult it was for Old Six to survive until now. He had climbed out from a pile of corpses. As if he suddenly thought of something, he glanced around and cried out involuntarily, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The sixth brother glanced at the crowd and scratched his head in embarrassment. Just as he was about to speak, he heard someone shouting from afar, "Bing Qingzi, don't run." It was Pei Fong's voice. In the blink of an eye, the five of them arrived at the scene. The scene of blood flowing like a river made them temporarily lose interest in Bing Qingzi. All of them stared at the scene below with ugly expressions on their faces. Just by looking at the clothes on the ground, one could tell that there were people who had not died, and there were quite a few of them. Because the five of them were the most active and fought the most, they naturally died the most. The rulers who had hurried over were all dumbfounded. They had suffered great losses, and it was like cutting off their own flesh. Especially when he saw the dozens of early divine transformation realm cultivators, who were covered in frost and shivering from head to toe. It was obvious that they had been hit by Bing Qingzi's dark yin palm. Pei Fong shouted, "Bing Qingzi, what do you mean?" Although he shouted loudly, he didn't have the guts to fight Bing Qingzi alone. He had suffered losses in Bing Qingzi's hands more than once or twice, so he knew how terrifying Bing Qingzi could be. "What do you mean? There's something wrong with your brain." Bing Qingzi glanced at him and didn't have the time to care about him. He asked again, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The sixth brother scratched his head in embarrassment again. Suddenly, he was stunned and said in astonishment, "Senior brothers and the others should have escaped. Didn't Master encounter them?" Escaped? Why are they still fighting so fiercely after escaping? Everyone's gaze fell on him. Some of them were dumbfounded as they waited to hear the rest of the story. Bing Qingzi was startled. As soon as he rushed over, he heard the sounds of fighting and immediately stopped searching. He rushed over here with all his might and didn't pay attention to what was happening on the way here. Maybe he was really too late. "Your senior brothers and the others have left. Why are you here alone?" Bing Qingzi couldn't understand. The bloody sixth brother scratched his head again and laughed foolishly. He glanced at the crowd and said proudly, "These people are too much. Under such a critical situation, I separated from my senior brothers and the others. They continued to walk forward, while I walked in the opposite direction. When there was some distance between us, I pulled the sky-shaking sound arrow that I picked up to attract everyone here. I didn't expect these people to be so easily fooled. Hee. It was a silly dog-eat-dog fight for a long time." Everyone was shocked and looked at the sixth brother with a strange look. If what he said was true, then this guy really made everyone speechless. He was obviously sacrificing himself to cover his senior brothers and escape. Was there such a great person in the cultivation world? But how could he still survive after being beaten like this? No matter whether what he said was true or not, it was a miracle that he could survive after looking at the tragic scene below and the miserable state of his body. It didn't matter if others didn't believe him. Bing Qingzi believed his disciple's words. He pursed his lips and was proud of teaching such a disciple. It was worth it for him to come all the way here to save them. He nodded excitedly and said, Good. As expected of my disciple." Yin Baikong could see that most of the people who died here were his world commerce's people. He shouted with a gloomy face, "Bing Qingzi, how are you going to explain this matter?" "Explain what?" Bing Qingzi knew that his disciple and Yan Juixing were fine, and immediately calmed down. He stared at him coldly and said with narrowed eyes, "Just for a groundless thing, you actually dared to attack my disciple and still ask me how to explain it? I want to know how you are going to explain it." "Bing Qingzi, don't give me that." Pei Fong continued. "If you don't give us a satisfactory answer today, don't even think about leaving." Bing Qingzi sneered. "Fatty Pei, don't brag too early. Since I dared to come here today, I was prepared not to go back. Fatty Pei, let me say this first. Today, even if both of us die here, we will first kill you before we die. I guarantee that you won't be able to escape. If you don't believe me, you can try. Killing one of you isn't much, but killing two of you isn't a problem. As he spoke, he sized up the other 4 soul formation final stage experts. His eyes were unusually fierce, as if he was picking another person to die with him. Which one of the top figures in the cultivation world wasn't a ruthless person? If he was forced into a corner, no one would doubt his determination. Pei Feng's chubby face stiffened. If Bing Qingzi really went all out to kill him, with his cultivation, it would be hard to say what would happen to him. Moreover, he was missing a hand now. The saber in his right hand had become a left-hand saber. He wasn't used to using it. The other 4 were stunned. Just like what Bing Qingzi said, he probably dared to come here alone, because he was prepared to die. If Bing Qingzi wanted to go all out, could he kill 1 or 2 of them? Who could deny this with absolute certainty? The atmosphere immediately became a little strange. Although the master and disciple were surrounded, no one dared to make the first move. Since Yan Juexing had already escaped, it wasn't worth it to go all out against Bing Qingzi. The most important thing now was to find Yan Juexing. In Utopia, the army was ready for battle. Close to 10,000 people were evenly distributed according to the ratio of tribulation passing stage, nascent soul stage, and core formation stage. They were divided into 30 groups. In other words, in each group, there were close to 100 tribulation passing stage, 100 nascent soul stage, and 100 core formation stage cultivators. They were all mobilized. In order to seize the favorable opportunity, Yu Qianqiu personally scouted the place where they were going to attack as fast as possible. It was all thanks to the team members who had been sent out to scout the place. They had indeed made a great contribution. Of course, it was also related to his arrangements in advance. At that time, it was for convenience in the future. Yu Qianqiu looked at the black mass of masked people in front of him and sighed. This was the first time that all of them were mobilized. This time, they had chosen 90 countries to attack. There were 30 teams, which meant that each team had to attack 3 countries consecutively. This meant that he had to oversee the deployment of Utopia. Chen Feng and Guan Yu stood behind him. Guan Yu had a complicated look in his eyes. Were these people training for so long just for this day? Boss had probably used it once. There would probably be a second time, a third time. Chen Feng's group of subordinates were quickly distributing the necessary battle resources to everyone. Very soon it was completed. Chen Feng's woman, Xiao Wanqing, was also watching from the side. From time to time, she would stare at Yu Qianqiu with a slightly resentful look. Yu Qianqiu unintentionally glanced at her and was slightly stunned. He realized that her belly was actually getting bigger. Was she pregnant? He avoided Xiao Wanqing's resentful gaze and deliberately didn't look at her. He tilted his head and looked at Chen Feng. He thought to himself, this guy is really free. Xu Ping had also led a group of women from Ethereal Palace over. She had received orders from Yu Qianqiu to bring people to handle logistics. She didn't know how big of a movement Yu Qianqiu was going to make this time. He actually mobilized everyone. However, when she looked at Yu Qianqiu, her gaze was also somewhat resentful. After coming, he didn't look for her. Instead, he gave her a rigid order. It was not romantic at all. At this moment, Zhang Peng and a group of leaders came out of the combat room. After the leaders dispersed, they quickly gathered the team leaders of their respective teams and distributed the map of the attack. They formed a circle and drew out the terrain on the ground to explain the distribution of the attack mission. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. It was fast and efficient. Their years of training finally showed results. After the leaders explained the mission clearly to the team leaders returned to their respective teams to explain the mission. After clarifying the mission as quickly as possible, they quickly reported back to Zhang Peng that their preparations were complete. Then, Zhang Peng ran to the front of the checkpoint and saluted, reporting to the leader, "Everything is ready. We can set off at any time." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and swept his gaze across the high-spirited team members. Their morale was not bad. He immediately flew above the formation. Chapter 587. He stared at the ground and memorized the sequence of attacks. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and established contact with the 90 attacking points in the outside world. His divine sense quickly spread out and enveloped the team members below. The teams disappeared one by one, and only one team remained. Their task was to be a substitute. Yu Qianqiu remained floating in the air with his eyes closed, maintaining contact with the 90 attacking points outside. The surroundings were quiet, and no one made a sound to disturb him. In a wilderness in Shiman country, a large area of rubble was piled up, forming a rocky hill. Experienced cultivators could tell that these were the rubble that had been produced by mining spirit stones. The rocky hill was a wasteland in the southern suburbs. Not even a single weed could be seen, and there were only piles of rubble. 300 masked men suddenly appeared out of thin air. The leader of the masked men quickly scanned the terrain and confirmed that it was their target. He faced the target and waved his arms forward. Attack according to the original plan. The 50th early-stage tribulation passing expert quickly leaped into the air and pounced toward the first target. The communication formation was the first point they had to destroy. They had to destroy it at all costs as quickly as possible. They could not give the other party any time to spread the news. Once the other party spread the news of the attack, it might immediately attract strong reinforcements nearby. Although they did not know if there were strong reinforcements nearby, they could not take this risk. The first attack had to break the other party's throat. They could not let the other party make any sound to the outside world. Because of this, 50 of the 100 most experienced cultivators, at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage, were sent out to destroy the enemy's communication point. Enemy attack. A terrified cry came from the high ground. However, it only managed to make one sound before it was dismembered by 3 lightning-fast flying swords. 3 masked men in black landed on the high ground. The leader was the leader of this team. He was also the leader of Utopia's first team, and enjoyed a high honor in Utopia. On both sides were the deputy leaders, and all 3 of them were early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators. The 3 of them stood with their backs facing each other, and coldly looked at the 200 or so team members, who had surrounded the entire Spirit Stone mine in broad daylight. Although the 3 of them were very confident in their combined strength, it could be seen from the position they were standing in that they were constantly on guard. This was the result of a long period of actual combat training. His tactical attainments were extremely high, and he would not allow any accidents to happen because of his arrogance. He had to be careful in every battle and treat it seriously. Although there was only one warning cry, it was enough to alert everyone in the mine. Inside the cave, inside the stone house, a large group of cultivators flashed out. Everyone first looked towards the observation point, but what they saw were 3 majestic masked men. A burly man with a curly beard stood out from the crowd. He was obviously the most important person here. Just as he was about to shout at the 3 masked men, he saw nearly 50 men in black, forming a triangular formation, and rushing towards a cave. The mustache man's expression changed, and he immediately reacted. These people wanted to destroy the communication array that connected to the outside world. He immediately shouted, "Stop them! Protect the communication array!" The group of people quickly shot up into the sky and chased after them. The guards outside the communication array also rushed to intercept them. The first person in the front corner of the triangular assault formation quickly made 2 hand gestures, and the 50 people all threw out their arrow talismans. Dense yellow lights whizzed out like rain, and the people who rushed to intercept them were immediately thrown into confusion. The last row of 10 people in the triangular formation immediately turned around and rushed back after throwing out the arrow talismans. The flying swords in their hands flew out, forming a sword net to strangle the people chasing them. On the spot, dozens of people let out mournful screams. Blood rained down along with dismembered corpses. Such a fierce and swift attack immediately scared the people who rushed over, and they didn't dare to continue. Some people even turned around and fled without hesitation. The triangular formation that had been shortened by a section plunged into the crowd of people blocking them. Flying swords flashed fiercely, and miserable screams rang out continuously. 10 people separated from each side of the triangular formation to deal with the opponents outside the cave. The remaining 20 people formed a small triangle that went straight into the cave entrance. There were 6 core formation stage cultivators guarding the cave entrance. Seeing that the attackers were so powerful, they were already scared silly. They didn't even fight, but they knew that they couldn't stop them. 4 people immediately ran to the sides, and 2 people turned around and ran back into the cave. Unfortunately, the 4 cultivators didn't run away. They were already surrounded outside, and the only thing waiting for them was to be killed without mercy. As soon as the small triangle went into the cave entrance, it immediately split into an even smaller triangle. 10 people directly rushed into the cave, and the remaining 10 people guarded the cave entrance. Soon after, 2 screams came from inside the cave, followed by a series of chaotic explosions. Soon after, the 10 people who rushed into the cave came out. The leader of the small team made a gesture of success to the leader on the high ground, indicating that they had successfully destroyed the communication array. This only happened in a few moments. From the moment they launched their attack to the moment they destroyed their target, the small team didn't even stop and directly rushed into the cave. Even the cultivator, who was preparing to send a message to the sect, was killed before he could activate the communication array. The leader made a gesture to the small team leader, and the small team immediately became the main force of the cleanup. 5 people in a group, they quickly scattered and killed. It was unknown what the 2 vice leaders said to the leader, but the leader made a gesture to shrink the encirclement, and an even more bloody and tragic massacre began. For a moment, screams rang out everywhere, and in this bloody web of over 300 people, no one could escape the final misfortune. The whole battle ended very quickly. In less than an hour, the ground was already covered in pools of blood. The wind was bleak, and the blood was very thick. Many people's bodies were torn to pieces, and those who died in one piece died with their eyes wide open. Their lifeless eyes reflected a group of black-clothed people shuttling back and forth, cleaning up the battlefield. Anything that was worth a bit of money was taken away. The entire team quickly gathered. 2 of them were clearly injured, and it seemed that their injuries weren't clear yet. They were carried back to the team. The 3 people on the high ground also returned to the team at the same time. The leader took one last look at the battlefield. From start to finish, it took less than an hour, and the mission here was successfully completed. He took out a small black flag from his storage bag and casually threw it at a large rock. With a ding, it stabbed into the rock. A gentle breeze blew, and the golden word "hero" fluttered in the wind. The leader raised his hand to touch the silver-coated nameplate on his chest and injected his divine sense. All the team members did the same. Even the 2 injured team members were helped to cover the silver-coated nameplates on their chests. They would return together. They wouldn't leave them behind. In Utopia's military camp, Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the sky with his eyes closed, frowned slightly. He sensed the fluctuations of divine sense from the outside world. His divine sense surged out and traversed to the outside world. In the blink of an eye, a group of people returned successfully. These people didn't have time to rest. They removed one of the 3 storage bags from their waists and threw it to the side. 2 of the injured team members were carried out of the formation. 2 people immediately flashed over from the reserve formation and joined the battle formation. Then, the team disappeared from everyone's sight once again. They had completed one of the 3 attack points, but there were still 2 more that they hadn't completed their mission. Chu Ping waved her hand, and a group of women quickly flashed over. The 2 injured team members were carried away for treatment, and the storage bags on the ground were also cleaned up. After they left, another group of people returned after the battle. The various countries were mobilizing their manpower to snatch Yanjuisheng, but Yu Qianqiu was taking advantage of the country's weakest defense to plunder the Spirit Stone mines. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Everyone was afraid of Hero. Usually, there were many experts guarding the Spirit Stone mines, so it was very difficult to strike. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, so it would be a waste not to do it. If he wanted to do it, he might as well do it this time. It would probably be very difficult to succeed so easily the next time. Actually, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to strike at those places that were more profitable. Although spirit stone mines were places that produced spirit stones, very few people would store a large amount of spirit stones in a spirit stone mine in the wilderness. They would save up a little and send it back. However, it was different for the headquarters or branches of the world commerce. There were a lot of spirit stones circulating every day, so it would be a great harvest to strike a few of them. However, there were many people in such places, and they were all guarded by experts. It would be troublesome if they bumped into the experts who were doing business here. Not to mention the headquarters of the world commerce. Even the branches of the world commerce wouldn't dare to act rashly with Yu Qianqiu's current strength, let alone the headquarters of the world commerce. With Bing Qingzi, who was currently the third most powerful person in the world, it would be a lie if the other 5 people didn't care once he made a move. It wouldn't be worth it to fight Bing Qingzi with all his might without even seeing Yan Juexing. Yan Juexing shouldn't have escaped far. Let's find Yan Juexing first. When the time comes, there will be a way to pry open his mouth. Whether it's a groundless matter like what Bing Qingzi said, we will know once we ask. Pei Fong changed his tone. Since he had misgivings about using force with Bing Qingzi, he might as well use another method. You dare! Bing Qingzi shouted. The profound ice sword had already appeared in his hand, and his aura had directly locked onto Pei Fong. The latter's expression stiffened, and he looked at the other 4 people. Yin Baikong carried the God of Fortune sword and said indifferently, Brother Bing, everyone is here to clarify the matter. Everything will be clear once we find Yan Juexing. You better think it through. Don't go against the cultivators of the world. When the time comes, it won't look good for everyone. Bing Qingzi coldly stared at Yin Baikong, and his murderous aura was faintly discernible. The other 5 people immediately became alert. At this moment, high up in the sky, the sound of high-speed flying could be heard again. Everyone raised their heads and saw a white shadow flying over. Who else could it be other than the snow flood dragon? Immediately, someone clicked his tongue and said, A spirit beast is indeed a spirit beast. It's actually fine. There seemed to be 4 people sitting on it. Man Hu and the other 3, who were riding on the snow flood dragon, knew that the snow flood dragon was bringing them to find their master. However, when they saw the large group of people below from the sea of clouds, their expressions immediately changed. They had finally escaped from the wolf's den, but the snow flood dragon had sent them back. Wasn't this asking for death? Chapter 588. What does the snow flood dragon want to do? Yan Juexing asked. He even suspected that the sect wanted to offer him to settle the matter, but he felt that it was unlikely, because if Bing Qingzi wanted to harm him, the curse on his body wouldn't let him off. Man Hu punched the snow flood dragon's back and shouted, Snow flood dragon, turn around and run. Moo! The snow flood dragon responded with a loud cry. How could it run when its master was down there, and the person who beat it up just now? Shaking its head and tail, it rushed down with a whoosh. Master is down there, Old Seven exclaimed. Since Bing Qingzi was here, Yan Juexing could only bite the bullet and continue. At least for now, it would be safer to stay by Bing Qingzi's side. Otherwise, it would be difficult to escape. Under everyone's gaze, the snow flood dragon arrived with 4 people on its back. It circled around Bing Qingzi and his disciple, and let out a soft moo. Man Hu and the other 3 also rushed to Bing Qingzi's side and saluted. Bing Qingzi was startled when he saw the 4. Then his face sank and he transmitted his voice to Man Hu. Since you escaped, why did you come back? You're courting death. Man Hu replied helplessly. We met the snow flood dragon on the way. Who knew it would bring us back? It's too late to escape. The snow flood dragon stared at the 5 with its red eyes and tensed its body, ready to attack at any time. It remembered clearly that it was these 5 people who beat it up just now. Suddenly, it heard its master snorting unhappily. It turned its huge head and saw its master staring at it coldly. After living together for so many years, It knew clearly that its master was going to teach it a lesson. It shrunk back in fear, not knowing what it did to make its master unhappy. It weakly let out a moo. Bing Qingzi saw its snow-white head and lower jaw dripping with blood. Obviously it was injured before. His heart softened, and he turned his head away. Eldest senior brother. The bloodied sixth brother called out. Man Hu and the others looked over, and immediately revealed an expression of disbelief. They said excitedly, "You're still alive." They hugged each other with obvious excitement. They had a lot to say, but they knew this wasn't the right place. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Pei Fong sneered as he stared at Yin Juexing. Many people here had never seen Yin Juexing before, but almost all of the soul formation experts present knew him, because they had met at Wen Lanfeng's place. Now it was as if a monster had seen Xuanzang. All of them had a greedy look on their faces. Aya. Im Baikong put on a fake smile and said, "I should have guessed it long ago." When Brother Bing's disciple was still in the Chinese cultivation world, he was always protecting Yin Juexing. Naturally, there must be a reason. It turns out that he was hiding a big secret. Hu Changshou, who had been silent all this while, also said, "I didn't expect Brother Bing to be so scheming." Bing Qingzi had completely calmed down. If his disciples and Yin Juexing had escaped, he would have fought to the death. But now he couldn't afford to be impulsive. "Don't be so weird here, you two. Others might not know, but don't you know? Do I look like an ambitious person? If I was ambitious, would I have waited until now?" Bing Qingzi pointed at Yin Juexing and said, "To be honest, this is my 8th disciple. I wanted to wait until he reached the Great Snow Mountain before officially announcing it to the public. I didn't expect everyone to be so impatient." When Yin Juexing was in the sacred ground of Baiwan Nation, he wanted to worship him as his master out of respect. But Bing Qingzi refused to be his master no matter what. Now that things had come to this, he could only use this reason. Yin Juexing glanced at Bing Qingzi without any expression. Im Baikong and Hu Changshou looked at each other. From their expressions, it was obvious that they didn't believe Bing Qingzi's words. The former sneered and said, "Traveling thousands of miles, bringing a spirit beast down the mountain, and even falling out with us. 8th disciple? Brother Bing, don't you think this is too far-fetched?" Bing Qingzi immediately replied sarcastically, "Those who are familiar with me know that I always treat all the disciples I accept as my own, regardless of whether they are close or distant. As for how you view your own disciples, I don't know, but don't put the same idea on me." Im Baikong's face stiffened. It was indeed a failure to say such words in front of the disciples of the World Commerce Chamber. Everyone looked at the bloody old sixth, and seemed to have realized something. Sacrificing himself to save others was probably related to the friendship between the master and the disciple. But understanding was understanding. No one would believe Bing Qingzi's words. Pei Fong stared at Yin Juexing and shouted, "Brat, if you don't have a guilty conscience, why did you escape?" Yin Juexing said indifferently, "I'm not a fool. I naturally know the terrifying consequences of this rumor. Do I have to be captured by you guys before explaining? If I really have a guilty conscience, I would have escaped earlier. Why would I return?" There was no other reason. He just wanted to make this matter clear in front of the world, so that there wouldn't be endless torment. The rumor about me possessing an extraordinary martial art is purely Niu Yi trying to harm me. As soon as he said this, he hit the crux of the problem. Bing Qingzi immediately gave him a praising look. Everyone else was stunned. That's right. If there really was something shameful, why would he come back to die if he had already escaped? They naturally didn't know that Yin Juexing and the rest were brought back by the snow flood dragon. Everyone subconsciously looked at the bloody scene before them, and their expressions twitched. If it really was a rumor spread by Niu Yi, then this loss was not worth it. But no one would believe him just because of one sentence. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he sneered. "That's hard to say. Maybe you knew that sooner or later, you wouldn't be able to escape from our palms. You can escape today, but not tomorrow. So you purposely did the opposite and spread lies to mislead everyone. Hee, you've got guts. Do you really think we're so easy to fool?" For Bing Qingzi's sake, As long as you tell us your extraordinary martial art, we can consider letting you go. That's right. The top experts looked at each other and echoed. Fatty Pei, I think you're really tired of living. How dare you threaten my disciple in front of me? Bing Qingzi shouted. He knew that in this kind of situation, he couldn't show any signs of weakness. Otherwise, everyone wouldn't mind joining forces to beat him down. Only by being strong would everyone have some misgivings. Man Hu and his fellow disciples also revealed a look of not hesitating to fight to the death. All of them held their weapons and cheered for their master. This scene made everyone secretly sigh. This was indeed a sect that was as close as a father and son. If it was their own disciple, he would have shown fear under the pressure of so many experts. How would he dare to risk his life against a spirit-severing expert? Master, please calm down. Yan Juexing bowed to Bing Qingzi and said, The more I argue, the clearer it becomes. Master, please allow disciple to argue. Bing Qingzi snorted and agreed. Thank you, Master. Yan Juexing turned to Pei Fong and said, May I ask Senior a question? Speak. Pei Fong sneered. Let's see what tricks you can come up with. Yan Juexing said calmly, From Senior's words, you seem to think that Junior has a peerless martial art. Do you think that my master already knew about this? Kid, it's not that I think so, but everyone thinks so. Pei Fong waved his broken hand and pointed to the surroundings. It's human nature. It's understandable. Yan Juexing nodded and said, May I ask Senior, if my master already knew that I had a peerless martial art and the ambition to conquer the world, would he let me live until now? Would he have allowed me to live until now? Wouldn't he have taken me to Snowy Mountain, when everyone didn't know, and forced me to use the peerless martial art to cultivate? Wouldn't that be safer? Wouldn't he have waited until Niu Yid misled the crowd and made everyone come here to kill each other? Then he would come to save me at all costs. Don't you think it's suspicious? This series of questions was thought-provoking, especially the phrase kill each other. It made everyone's hair stand on end when they saw the bloody scene. What was Niu Yid trying to do? Was he trying to incite everyone to kill each other? Everyone couldn't help but ask themselves. Yes, if Bing Qingzi knew that Yan Juexing had a peerless martial art, he would have already made his move on Yan Juexing. Why would he wait for everyone to fight for it? The group of people judged Bing Qingzi's heart with their own selfish hearts, and felt that it was impossible. They looked at each other in dismay. Even Pei Fong was speechless. All of you are possessed. Bing Qingzi snorted coldly, but he looked at Yan Juexing with more and more admiration. He was indeed the inheritor of the demonic book. His ability to deal with emergencies was incomparable to ordinary people. Yan Juexing looked around and cupped his hands at everyone. He continued to strike while the iron was hot. Does everyone know who that Niu Yid is? Does everyone know where that Niu Yid came from? I'm afraid no one knows, right? I've even heard that Niu Yid cheated every one of your spiritual stones. I just can't figure it out. Everyone believes in the words of a big liar that everyone knows. This junior doesn't know what to say. Is it really that trustworthy? This guy was quite eloquent. If Yu Qianqiu heard him, he would probably jump out and argue with him to see who was better and who was better. Everyone seemed to have woken up from a dream, but none of them looked good. Thinking about how they were cheated by Niu Yid once, it was already a huge joke. If they were cheated by him again, how could they endure it? Many people had already cast their gazes at Shangguan Taiping. If it wasn't for him, how could this happen? Shangguan Taiping felt guilty from everyone's gazes. He had an awkward expression as he realized how hard it was to be a good person. Yin Baikong looked below with resentment. His world commerce had suffered the greatest loss. He then looked around and realized that there was still an endless stream of world commerce disciples rushing over. His face turned black as he slowly turned his head to look at the battered Sikongju. Sikongju's heart thumped, and he tasted bitterness in his mouth. This news was from his own disciple, and he had confidently told his master. If he was cheated again and caused such a huge loss, how could he raise his head in world commerce in the future? Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Sikongju teleported in front of Yin Baikong and said with a bow, Master, one's words cannot be trusted. Niu Yid will be arriving at the headquarters in a few days. If this Yin Juexing is really magnanimous, why not let him follow us back to the headquarters? At that time, he will confront Niu Yud, and we will naturally be able to determine the truth. Chapter 589. Yin Baikong's eyes lit up and slightly nodded. That's right. Brother Bing, it's easy to prove your disciple's innocence. Let him follow me to the headquarters and confront Niu Yud. At that time, everything will be clear. If it really has nothing to do with Yin Juexing, I promise to send him safely back to Snowy Mountain. At the same time, he looked at Sikong Ju with a gentle gaze. This method was simply the best for him. Once Yin Juexing meets with Niu Yud, whether it's true or not, his world commerce wouldn't be able to escape. If Niu Yud could prove that Yin Juexing indeed had a peerless martial art, then everyone wouldn't need to fight over him anymore. Yin Juexing was already in his hands. If Niu Yud was lying, then he wouldn't be able to leave the world commerce so easily. One must know that the headquarters of the world commerce was filled with experts, with Yin Baikong personally overseeing it, 2 spirit-severing disciples, and a bunch of late-stage crossing tribulation experts. Not many people in the cultivation world could come and go as they pleased. Yin Juexing didn't know what to say. There was no reason to refuse. He couldn't help but look at Bing Qingzi. Bing Qingzi naturally couldn't let Yin Baikong take Yin Juexing away. Although he repeatedly denied the fact that Yin Juexing had a peerless martial art, he was well aware that what Niu Yud said was true. Just think about it. Niu Yud was actually able to see through Yin Juexing's background with a single glance. With such ability, Yin Juexing would probably have nowhere to hide in front of him, and he wouldn't be able to hide it even if he wanted to. At that time, he would probably not be able to return. Everyone's gazes also looked at Bing Qingzi to see what he would say. To prove Yin Juexing's innocence, Sikong Ju's method was the best. If he didn't agree, then he definitely had a guilty conscience. Then don't blame everyone for being impolite and snatching what should be snatched. Yin Baikong, I don't deny that your method isn't good, Bing Qingzi said in a deep voice. But if I let you take my disciple away in front of me today, then where would I put my face in the future? If I can't even protect my own disciple, then as his master, I won't be able to show my face in the future. Hearing this, many people exchanged glances. Sure enough, he still had a guilty conscience. All of them stared at Yin Juexing with interest, eager to make a move. Yin Baikong smirked and said, Brother Bing, this won't do, that won't do. Do you have any way to prove Yin Juexing's innocence? Now that things have come to this, I'm sure you're also aware that this matter has to be resolved. Seeing that everyone was pressuring their master, the hot-tempered 7th disciple could no longer bear it and shouted, What have we done wrong to you? We need to prove our innocence to you. Yin Baikong's gaze was like lightning as he stared at the 7th brother. He sneered and said, This old man is talking to your master. Since when is it your turn to interrupt? Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped the furious 7th brother from speaking again. He said to Yin Baikong, I naturally have a way to prove Yin Juexing's innocence. Oh, then we'll be all ears. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Everyone stared at Bing Qingzi, waiting to see what he could say. Bing Qingzi's cold eyes swept across the crowd. With a wave of his hand, the profound ice sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This action startled everyone. They all thought that he was going to make a move. Who knew that a dang sound could be heard? Bing Qingzi flicked the sword with his finger, and a crisp sound reverberated in the air. He raised the sword and said in a clear voice, I, Bing Qingzi, swear to the heavens that if my disciple Yin Juexing possesses a peerless martial art, let me, Bing Qingzi, die a horrible death in the future. Absolute silence. Everyone was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be so ruthless. He even made a deadly oath. This Yin Baikong and the others looked at each other. If they didn't believe it before, then what about now? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that Bing Qingzi would use his life to make a false oath. Man Hu and the others who recovered from the shock couldn't help but shout, Master! Yin Juexing silently stared at Bing Qingzi. He owed this sect too much. Only the few of them knew that Yin Juexing did possess a peerless martial art, the demonic book. However, their master made a false oath. This would definitely be punished by the heavens in the cultivation world. Bing Qingzi waved his hand at them and said, "It's nothing. Since we can't explain it clearly to them, we'll use facts to prove it. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future." He then stared at the five of them and said indifferently, "Everyone, do you believe me now?" Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyang Dao looked at each other. They felt it was a pity to let Bing Qingzi go just like that. Originally, they wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. However, it wasn't a good time to do so. Once they started fighting, Yin Baikong and Hu Changsha wouldn't just sit back and watch. Yin Baikong and Hu Changsha's expressions were a little awkward. The former smiled and said, "Brother Bing, don't misunderstand. Since the matter has been clarified, it's naturally fine. I hope Brother Bing won't take it to heart and understand." The change was really fast. However, the three of them were originally in a group of benefits. As long as there weren't any other benefits that could split the three of them, the past would naturally be the past. After all, they still had to deal with each other in the future. They were all experienced people and wouldn't be swayed by their emotions. They only knew what was true. Bing Qingzi coldly snorted and said, "Let's go." Under everyone's gaze, the master and disciples rode on the snow-flood dragon and soared into the sky. Brother Bing, have a safe journey. Yin Baikong and Hu Changsha cupped their hands and sent them off. The group of gathered experts looked down again. They didn't know where their anger came from. Yin Baikong pointed down and stared at Sikong Ju as he shouted, "What exactly is going on? Yin Juexing and the others have already escaped. Why are you all still fighting here?" Sweat appeared on Sikong Ju's forehead. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He turned around and called Zhang Zuansheng, who was also battered and exhausted, to question him. The lords of various countries also gathered their subordinates to reprimand them, asking them what exactly was going on. In the end, after a long discussion, one of them said that he saw someone fighting and went to help, while the other said that he saw someone fighting and went to help. They didn't know what they were fighting for. Only in the end did they understand. The main culprit was Bing Qingzi's disciple, because he released the sky-shaking arrow to lure the enemies. A group of people swarmed over and messed up the plan. This made the lords of various countries unbearably angry. This matter definitely couldn't be blamed on Bing Qingzi's disciple. He didn't do anything to provoke him. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for being blind. As a result, they all started scolding him. The lords of various countries had a bellyful of anger. Before they even returned to their own territories, some of them were already furious. Hero had looted 90 spirit stone mines in half a day. At the same time, he had committed crimes in 90 different countries. Every country was shocked. Hero had obviously taken advantage of the time when the country's defenses were at their weakest. However, Hero didn't go too far this time. He only killed people and didn't blow up the mines. However, the number of cultivators killed in 90 mines added up to a terrifying number. Although most of them were low-level cultivators, there were more than 20,000 cultivators. On average, there were 200 to 300 people killed in each mine. Not a single one survived. This was a shocking massacre. He had killed more than 20,000 cultivators. The entire cultivation world was a little dumbfounded. This hero was too ruthless. How could he do it with so many people? As a result, they all condemned Hero. What made all the countries palpitate was that 90 different locations were attacked at the same time. How many people did he use? When did such a huge force hide in the cultivation world, and no one knew about it? The unknown was the scariest, and the unknown intentions were the scariest. For a moment, all the countries felt insecure. When talking about Hero, their expressions changed. They all mobilized people to protect the important locations, afraid that Hero would come to them again. The cultivation world, which had been a little restless recently, suddenly became much quieter. Currently, many people in the cultivation world were very depressed. Yu Qianqiu was one of them. After receiving the news that Yin Juexing was safe and sound, he was extremely depressed. He didn't expect that Yin Juexing would still escape, even after being forced to such a state. Didn't this mean that Yin Juexing was indeed a character from another angle? On a flying magical artifact, Yulan was controlling it. The wind and clouds brushed past the ship's side, quickly flying over thousands of mountains and rivers. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting at the back, suddenly sighed. Scourge. Scourge. He felt that the harder it was to kill Yin Juexing, the more powerful he was. If he was left alive, he would definitely be a scourge in the future. He didn't know what logic was behind this. Senior, who are you calling scourge? Guan Zhongkai asked expressionlessly. After knowing that Yin Juexing was fine, he was also in a bad mood. He had already been scolded by Sikong Ju, who said that he would deal with him when he returned. Since even his grandmaster had confirmed that Yin Juexing was fine, it was most likely that Niu Yud was lying. This time, he had really caused his own death. However, this fella's cultivation was too high. Putting aside the fact that he couldn't beat him, he didn't even dare to scold him. He didn't even dare to show his face. Yulan, who was controlling the flying magical artifact, didn't look any better. His master, Shengguan Taiping, even had the heart to kill him, who asked him to lie about military intelligence, causing his master to offend a large group of people. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, then sighed. Nothing, I was talking about the hero. This hero is really a scourge. He actually killed so many people. Sigh. Scourge. These 2 days, he had heard many people talking about the hero. Then where does Senior think the hero came from? Guan Zhongkai said perfunctorily. You're asking me? Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose, then suddenly chuckled. If you ask me, other than your World Commerce Association, I really can't think of anyone else with this ability. Think about it. The hero obviously took advantage of the moment when the country's defenses were at their weakest. Such a large-scale attack, it was obvious that they were prepared. And regarding Yin Juexing's matter, your World Commerce Association was the first to know, right? You also had the best chance to set it up in advance, right? Plus, World Commerce Association has so many people, and that kind of ability. So, this so-called hero is actually most likely your World Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 590. Senior's joke is too big. Guan Zhongkai's tone was not very confident, and his eyes were slightly dazed. Hearing Niu Yud's words, he thought of something. As the third-generation head disciple of the World Commerce Association, he knew that the World Commerce Association was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Even though he was not deeply involved in some things, he still felt that something was wrong. Grandmaster Yin Baikong, other than having many wives and children, he also had many disciples. Who in the cultivation world didn't know that Grandmaster was very good at teaching disciples? He had taught 2 soul formation disciples, and there were at least 100 tribulation passing experts. He didn't even know how many martial uncles he had. This was also one of the main reasons why the World Commerce Association was so powerful in the cultivation world. In the eyes of outsiders, these martial uncles were the backbone of the World Commerce Association's headquarters. They were always stationed in the treasure bowl, and Grandmaster Yin Baikong rarely used them. But he unintentionally discovered that these martial uncles seemed to be doing something in the dark. There was once when he went to ask his master, but was reprimanded by his master, telling him not to worry so much and to do his own thing. Guan Zhongkai had always had doubts in his heart, but hearing Niu Yud's words, he was suddenly enlightened. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Could it be that hero was really a force of the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched when he saw his appearance. He glanced at Yulan Do, who seemed to be listening attentively, and his lips curled into a smile. Then he poked his head out and said patiently, I'm right. Did you remember something? Guan Zhongkai came back to his senses and repeatedly denied. Senior, you can't say such things. Our World Commerce Association is definitely not a hero. Think about it. Our World Commerce Association is also one of the victims this time. A spirit stone mine was also bathed in blood by hero. You can fool others, but you can't fool me. Yu Qianqiu winked and smiled evilly. The reason why hero looted World Commerce Association's spirit stone mine was to help world commerce clear of suspicion. Otherwise, others would always suffer, and only your World Commerce Association would be fine. Plus, only World Commerce Association has the ability to do such a big thing. It would be strange if outsiders didn't suspect you. That's why. Your World Chamber of Commerce is very smart and ruthless. In order to deceive people, they killed their own people to divert everyone's suspicion. The more Yu Qianqiu spoke, the more reasonable it became. Even the fake became the truth in his words. This gave Guan Zhongkai a fright. In particular, when he subconsciously turned his head to look at Yulan Du in front of him, he saw that Niu Yud was listening attentively to their conversation. This caused Guan Zhongkai to groan incessantly. He wanted nothing more than to stuff Niu Yud's mouth with something. He could only blame himself for having nothing better to do. Of all the things he could have asked, he had to ask this question. If word of this got out, the World Commerce Association would immediately become the target of public criticism. At that time, Master would definitely skin him alive. Absolutely impossible. Senior might not know this, but back then, the first person Hero kidnapped was my Grandmaster's grandson. This matter was known by the entire cultivation world. This robbery of the Spirit Stone Mine is the second time they have targeted our world commerce. If our world commerce is a hero, we can't always target ourselves. Guan Zhongkai couldn't wait to clear his name. Since the journey is boring, Lousy will play with you. Yu Qianqiu sneered and lazily leaned on the back of the boat, saying, "Don't argue, some things can't withstand scrutiny. Let me ask you, why did Hero kidnap someone from your World Commerce Association the first time he appeared, and not someone else? Did they want to show that they had nothing to do with World Commerce Association the moment they appeared? Also, why did the hero only harm others once, but only your World Commerce Company twice?" Little did they know, the more someone tries to clear their name, the more suspicious that person is. Guan Zhongkai's forehead was covered in sweat from his words. He looked at Yulan Du in front of him from time to time, and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, Hero really has nothing to do with our World Commerce Association." "I said don't argue with me." Yu Qianqiu crossed his legs and said, "If you continue to argue, do you believe that I can even deduce the reason and motive behind your actions?" Guan Zhongkai was truly speechless. If he didn't continue to argue, did he have to admit the truth? After thinking about it, he decided not to say it. If he continued, he would definitely get sick from fright. He immediately changed the topic. "Senior, let's get down to business. Last time you said that Yin Juexing had exceptional martial arts, but after my grandmaster and the others investigated, it was completely false. We're about to reach World Commerce Association. Have you thought about how to explain it to my grandmaster?" Actually, Guan Zhongkai had always been puzzled. The matter had been exposed, proving that Niu Yud was lying. But why did Niu Yud still look as if nothing had happened? Was he not afraid at all? "Investigation," Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. "Only found a false result? Your Grandmaster Yin Baikong's foresight is very suspicious. Let Yin Juexing try in front of me. Others might not know, but do you think you don't? Did you forget the scene of Yin Juexing fleeing after being exposed by me that day?" With this said, Guan Zhongkai recalled the scene of Yin Juexing and the others leaving that day. It was indeed very suspicious. He couldn't help but nod. "I'm afraid you'll have to personally explain this matter to my grandmaster. We won't be able to explain it clearly." "Explain my ass. It's up to him whether he believes it or not. I didn't ask him to chase after Yin Juexing. It's none of my business." Yu Qianqiu sneered. "So what if I don't explain? What can your grandmaster do to me? Crazy." Guan Zhongkai was stunned. He was still hoping to bring him to the headquarters and let him explain to Grandmaster himself. If he explained clearly, he would feel better. But from his tone, he actually wanted to play hard on Grandmaster. If he angered Grandmaster, then wouldn't it be a great sin for him, as the person who brought him here? Endless towering mountains and precipitous ridges, a primordial forest left from ancient times. Under the endless greenery was eerie and terrifying. The forest was densely covered with wisteria, and all kinds of ferocious beasts frequently appeared, letting out fierce roars. This was within the borders of the Tuan nation, where the World Commerce Association was located. Yu Qianqiu lay on the side of the flying artifact, looking at the retreating mountain scenery below. Only cultivators would settle down and live in such a dangerous place. If it was immortal, it would probably be very difficult to go deep. He played with a pile of silver balls in his hands, and occasionally threw one down, as if he was shooting birds. The other two felt their teeth ache watching. The mountain terrain in front suddenly became dangerous, and there were occasional mountain peaks that rose abruptly. Yu Qianqiu walked to the front of the flying artifact and saw clouds and mist swirling in the distance. There was a tall mountain standing in the clouds and mist. Although it wasn't very tall, its altitude was obviously higher than the surrounding mountains. In the midst of being ethereal, it had a bit of a fairyland feeling. Yu Qianqiu raised his chin and asked, "That should be the God of Wealth Peak, right?" Guan Zhongkai, who had switched hands to control the flying artifact, replied, "That's right. The place protected by the clouds and mist is the cornucopia. And that highest peak is the World Commerce Association's headquarters, the God of Wealth Peak's core area." Saying this, he shook his head with a bitter smile. "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to Senior. We can directly land on the God of Wealth Peak, and don't need to enter from the entrance. In all these years, this is the first time I have the right to directly descend upon the God of Wealth Peak." Yu Qianqiu folded his arms and rubbed his chin. "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Entering from the entrance, I want to see what the world-renowned cornucopia looks like." Guan Zhongkai nodded and didn't say much. In reality, he was also a little apprehensive because he had made a mistake and didn't dare to see his grandmaster. If he could delay it, it would be good to see him later. Very soon, the flying artifact landed at the foot of the mountain between two peaks. These two mountains weren't tall, but they looked quite strange. They were like twins, almost identical in appearance. Standing at the edge of the clouds and mist, they were like two guards standing there silently, adding a bit of mystery to this place. Guan Zhongkai put away the flying artifact and said to Yu Qianqiu, who was looking around, "Senior, please follow me." Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed the two people in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. After going deep into the clouds and mist, he realized that this fog was really not ordinary thick. With his cultivation, his visibility was at most 3 meters. After walking between the two mountains, he realized that there was actually a cliff in front of him. A chain bridge extended from the clouds and mist to the side of the cliff. Judging from the direction of the thick main chain that was pulling the suspension bridge, the fixed place should be between the two mountains. Walking on the bridge, Yu Qianqiu didn't understand. What's the meaning of this? Can't we just fly over directly? Why do we need to make a suspension bridge? Guan Zhongkai walked as he turned back and explained. Senior, you may not know this, but because this is where our sect's headquarters is located, the security here is very tight. This cloud and mist isn't an ordinary defensive formation. It's an extremely powerful killing formation. The only way for outsiders to enter and exit this place is this suspension bridge. When crossing this bridge, if anyone leaves the vicinity of this bridge, they will immediately be sucked into this killing formation. Of course, people with the sect's permission will open other paths to enter and exit. Yulandu also turned back and said, Also, this path can be sealed at any time. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, This defense is indeed quite tight. It's very hard for people who want to go in and cause trouble to break in. It's even harder for people who want to come out after causing trouble to escape. That's natural. The World Commerce Association has always done its best to provide the safest trading ground for cultivators in the world. Guan Zhongkai said rather proudly. The three of them walked for nearly 200 meters before reaching the end of this bridge. In front of them was a cave. On both sides of the cave, there were two large tiger heads peeking out. They were very lifelike and looked like they were made of black iron. The two main chains of the suspension bridge were spat out from the tiger's mouth. It was very mighty and extraordinary. After entering the cave, it was bright inside and was filled with fluorescent stones for illumination. About 5 or 6 meters into the cave, they discovered that there was a stone room dug out on both sides of the cave. There were several cultivators sitting in each room. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right, and found that there was actually no one he could see through their cultivation. Chapter 591. As expected of the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, even the gatekeepers were at least at the tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu was secretly awed. Guan Zhongkai cupped his hands in greeting and greeted, "Martial uncle." Yulan followed suit, and cupped her hands in greeting. A man walked out from each of the two stone chambers, and nodded at Yulan. His gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly introduced, "This is Niu Yud, Senior Niu. He's someone Grandmaster wishes to see. This disciple has been ordered to lead the way." "So it's Mr. Niu." One of the men cupped his hands in a more amiable manner. Yu Qianqiu nodded in acknowledgement. The other man had a taut face and a serious expression. He frowned and asked, "Guan Zhongkai, since you're honorable master's guest, why are you walking here?" Guan Zhongkai replied, "Senior Niu wishes to see the scenery of Cornucopia, and specifically requested to enter from here." The man replied, "Mr. Niu, to enter from here, you need a jade archive as a guide. Do you have one on you?" Yu Qianqiu could hear a hint of displeasure in his tone. He thought to himself, "Did I offend you?" He calmly shook his head and said, "No. Then there's no other way. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to turn back and enter through a special passage. The rules here cannot be broken," the man said expressionlessly. Guan Zhongkai was stunned. Yulan also looked left and right in astonishment. The other man with a more amiable expression said in a low voice, "Junior martial brother, don't be rash. This is honorable master's guest." He cupped his hands in greeting and smiled at Yu Qianqiu. "Mister, please don't be offended. My junior martial brother has always been like this. Please follow me and apply for a jade archive. After that you'll be able to enter and exit freely." "So it's possible to apply for a jade archive?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He stared at the unfriendly man and asked softly, "So you're saying that you're deliberately making things difficult for me by asking me to turn back?" Guan Zhongkai was shocked. He had personally experienced Niu Yud's prowess. Moreover, Niu Yud had a bad temper. Even his master couldn't handle him. Immediately, he bowed repeatedly and said, "Senior, please calm down, calm down." Even Yulan took a step back, her eyes darting around, as if she was ready to watch a good show. The person with the amiable expression also came out to smooth things over. "It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart. Don't take it to heart. Junior brother, hurry up and apologize to Mr." Who would have thought that the man would say with a cold face, "Apologize? I didn't say anything wrong. Without the Jade Archive as a guide, we can't enter from here. Not to mention, I didn't stop him from applying for the Jade Archive." "All right." Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, "You've got guts to provoke me. You must be tired of living." As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic, cold, and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body, instantly filling the entire passageway. "Senior, please calm down," Guan Zhongkai said in a panic. But just as he said that, the rest of the words in his mouth were forced back by that extremely terrifying aura, and his entire body began to tremble. He thought to himself, "It's over." The temperature in the cave instantly dropped below freezing point. Coupled with the bone-chilling aura, everyone was implicated. Even the people in the stone chambers on both sides were no exception. Everyone's teeth were chattering. The person with the amiable expression was terrified. He slowly raised his hand and said, "Senior." He realized that it was extremely difficult for him to speak. The person with the unkind tone was in trouble. Yu Qianqiu mobilized the terrifying aura of the black flame, and didn't hesitate to heavily punish him. This caused him to roll his eyes continuously. After swaying for a while, he couldn't take it anymore, and fell to the ground with a plop. He didn't wake up, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. "Humph." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "Seeing that we might become family in the future, I'll spare your life. If there's a next time, I'll kill you without mercy. Even if Yin Baikong comes, he won't be able to protect you." The terrifying aura in the cave quickly disappeared with his last words, and returned to normal. But the others still felt their bodies stiffen. They couldn't recover for a while. and they all looked at Niu Yid in fear. Guan Zhongkai looked at the unconscious martial uncle on the ground, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, "Why did you have to do this? You even dragged the others into this." Yulan Du was even more shocked when he activated his internal energy to dispel the terrifying aura that had seeped into his body. He knew that Niu Yid was powerful, but he had never experienced it himself. He didn't expect him to be this powerful. He didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with an expert at the end of the crossing calamity stage. Just that terrifying aura alone was enough to deal with him. He had to inform Master of this as soon as possible. The group of people gradually regained their mobility. The first thing the amiable person did was to squat down to check on his junior. He was relieved to find that he was still alive but unconscious. He waved his hand and summoned 2 people from the stone chamber to carry his junior away. Then he cupped his fists and apologized. "Thank you for your mercy, senior. Please follow me to complete the Jade Archive." He knew that the person in front of him wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Yu Qianqiu followed him expressionlessly. That person personally took out a Jade Archive and asked Yu Qianqiu to imbue a strand of true origin into it. Then, he immediately inscribed a set of incantations into the Jade Archive. Soon, the incantations were completed and handed to Yu Qianqiu. "How many spirit stones do you need?" Yu Qianqiu waved the Jade Archive in his hand. That person waved his hand and said, "Senior is my master's honored guest. How could I dare to accept your spirit stones?" Then he gave Guan Zhongkai a look. Guan Zhongkai understood and hurried over to invite Yu Qianqiu to leave. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to waste his time here, and left with the 2 of them. That person remained behind Miao Yi and bowed, saying, "Farewell, senior." Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head, slowly letting out a sigh. He thought to himself, "I've finally sent this terrifying guy away." How terrifying! With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu walked forward. The people standing in the passageway hurriedly made way for the 3 of them. They all stood on either side of him and looked at him with reverence. These people were cultivators from various places who had to pass through the passageway. They didn't expect to bump into the famous Niu Yid here. Not to mention, they even got to watch the show. However, the aura that filled the cave just now was too terrifying. Even now, everyone still hadn't fully recovered from it. After walking for a short distance, they discovered a profound light screen blocking their path. The color of the light screen was almost exactly the same as the luster of the fluorite. If they weren't careful, they would definitely bump into it. The 3 of them took out their Jade Archives and imbued their true origin into it. A ray of white light struck the light screen, and 3 holes just wide enough for 3 people to pass through appeared. After the 3 of them passed through, the light screen quickly closed up again. Such a profound wave light screen, in the short passage of nearly 100 meters, actually had 3 obstructions. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh at the tight security of the World Chamber of Commerce. If someone caused trouble and wanted to escape, even if they could break through these 3 light screens, it would still take them some time. Similarly, people who tried to barge in from the outside would face the same problem. Meanwhile, the World Chamber of Commerce would have enough time to react and respond. Once they exited the cave, their eyes suddenly lit up. A bustling city was right in front of them. It was built in a basin surrounded by mountains. It was hard to imagine that such a bustling city could actually exist in such a desolate and uninhabited primeval forest. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. This was a cornucopia. It really did look like a basin. It was far bigger than the 100 Flowers Valley, and far more lively than the 100 Flowers Valley. Although it wasn't as big as the capitals of the various countries that Yu Qianqiu had been to, the various buildings here were all exquisite. They couldn't be compared to the ordinary commoners' buildings in the secular world. Thinking about it, it made sense. Most of the buildings here were representatives of the various powers of the cultivation world. How could the secular world compare? The most conspicuous was the cone-shaped towering mountain in the middle of the buildings. The cultivation world's famous god of wealth peak stood in the center of the cornucopia, the core of the World Chamber of Commerce. All sorts of buildings surrounded the foot of the mountain, spreading out in a circular pattern. Guan Zhongkai saw the astonishment in Yu Qianqiu's eyes, and was somewhat pleased. He smiled and said, "Senior, this is our World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. Please." He pointed to the steps beneath his feet, and made an inviting gesture. Yu Qianqiu nodded, and the three of them followed the steps into the basin. Stepping into the bustling city, people came and went. It felt like the streets of the secular world. If they didn't know that this was the cultivation world's famous World Chamber of Commerce, who would have believed that they were currently in an important area of the cultivation world? On both sides of the street, there were pavilions with green tiles and vermilion eaves. Wine shops and commercial buildings could be found everywhere. There were even some places where new buildings were being built. As Yu Qianqiu looked left and right, he couldn't help but sigh that Im Baikong was indeed a talent for business. He managed to manage such a remote place into such a prosperous place. On the way, they saw people constantly greeting Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. However, when they saw the two of them respectfully accompanying a middle-aged man, they couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. They felt that he looked a little unfamiliar. But then they remembered that the two of them had been accompanying a certain person in the cultivation world during this period of time. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered who that person was. Not long after, the news that Niu Yid had arrived at the World Chamber of Commerce spread through the entire cornucopia at lightning speed. Dormant Spring. Yu Qianqiu stared at the signboard of a building and read it out loud. Then he looked at the dozen or so gorgeously dressed women downstairs. These women were basically all at the foundation establishment stage. They constantly tugged at the male cultivators passing by on the street. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth, thinking that he was seeing things. He asked the two of them blankly, "What are they doing?" "Soliciting customers," Yulan said disapprovingly. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief, "Could this be a brothel? There are brothels in the cultivation world. Do cultivators do this? Are they being forced?" When he said this, his expression didn't look too good. Guan Zhongkai explained, "No one is forcing them, they're all voluntary. Some itinerant cultivators don't have a source of spirit stones and want to continue cultivating in the cultivation world. So there are many who do this. After they save up enough spirit stones, they'll concentrate on cultivating. When they run out of spirit stones, they might come out and continue doing this. Of course, this place isn't like the brothels in the secular world. They won't restrict personal freedom. Here the brothel keeper takes a cut. If you want to do it, you can come and go. It's very convenient." Chapter 592. Very convenient. Yu Qianqiu's expression was lifeless. He really didn't expect that these immortals in the eyes of the secular world would actually be in this line of work. He subconsciously couldn't accept it. He shook his head helplessly and said, "They're all quite good-looking. Of all the things they could do, why did they have to be in this line of work?" Yulan looked at him with a somewhat strange expression. It was the kind of expression that seemed to say that he didn't understand the suffering of the world. She smiled and said, "Senior's cultivation is profound. I'm afraid you rarely come into contact with low-level cultivators, especially those itinerant cultivators. They'll do anything for spirit stones." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Who said that? I've come into contact with many itinerant cultivators in Ghost Manor, but I've never heard of cultivators in this line of work." Yulan smiled and said, "Who would go around talking about it after doing this line of work? It's only made public in cornucopia. In fact, there are many itinerant cultivators out there who do wild work, but it's not safe. They often put in the effort, but don't get anything in return. They might even get themselves killed." "That's right." Guan Zhongkai nodded and said, "It's different here. As long as they pay taxes, they'll receive the protection of world commerce. They'll get something in return if they put in the effort." "Are these people all itinerant cultivators?" Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at Spring Slumber. "Of course. Cultivators with sex all have a source of spirit stones. Who would do this?" Yulan said, When I was in Ghost Manor, I heard that there are many female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex. Those male itinerant cultivators can't even find a partner for dual cultivation. Why don't they find a sex disciple to marry? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled. The latter said disdainfully, there are female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex, but they're very few. How many of these female itinerant cultivators, who have been fooling around outside for so long, are still virgins? In order to survive, who knows how many people they've dual cultivated with? Most of the sex disciples are just playing around. It's not easy to marry them. It's already not easy to get past the elders of the sect. Which sect would accept prostitutes? Wouldn't we become a laughing stock if word got out? Guan Zhongkai nodded in agreement and said, if he really is a talented loose cultivator, the various sects will fight to recruit him. However, there are very few who marry into the sect. What Senior has heard are all rumors, and cannot be trusted. Actually, the situation of female loose cultivators is even worse than that of male loose cultivators. However, they are also more vain. They do things that they have to swallow, and pretend that they are living a good life. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Thinking about it, this era was different from his previous world. It was extremely feudal. Most of the legitimate marriages were first-hand goods. It was difficult to find a legitimate husband for second-hand goods and above. Besides, when he was doing well in his previous life, he seemed to have quite a number of subordinates who were in this line of work. Didn't he turn a blind eye to it? There was no reason for him to come here and have such a messy sympathy for others. The three of them had been standing there for a long time. Because of Guan Zhongkai, they had already alerted the brothel keeper inside. He saw a graceful and beautiful young woman swaying her hips as she walked out. She waved her hand from afar and shouted, I was wondering who it was. So it's Master Guan. You haven't been here for a long time. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Zhongkai suspiciously. It seemed that this guy was a regular here. Yulan Do had a calm expression, as if this was normal. The young woman tried to drag Guan Zhongkai inside. Guan Zhongkai laughed and pushed her away, saying, I still have something to do today. Don't mess around. Master Yu, are you busy? The young woman stayed by Yulan Do's side again. Yulan Do also said that he had something to do, and pushed her away. In the end, the young woman stared at Yu Qianqiu again. She smiled coquettishly and said, I haven't seen this master before. Why don't you two introduce him to this servant? Although Yu Qianqiu didn't like this, he was happy to deal with such a knowledgeable person. He wanted to tease her a little. Suddenly, he heard a quarrel in Spring Slumber Loft. There were also faint sounds of fighting. The young woman's expression changed. She apologized to them and hurried back. Yulan Do laughed and said, Someone is making trouble in cornucopia. I wonder which family's young master is it? Guan Zhongkai's expression turned a little ugly. After a while, they saw three people pulling a woman out. The woman struggled with all her might and kept shouting, Let me go. A group of Orioles came out of Spring Slumber Loft and seemed to be watching the show. Looking at the scene, it didn't seem like someone was making trouble. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't understand. Yu Qianqiu felt that the three men were familiar. He seemed to have seen them somewhere. Someone was making trouble in cornucopia. This was something new. Many people immediately rushed over to watch the show. At this time, the Orioles in Spring Slumber Loft opened a path. The beautiful young woman came out and indifferently walked in front of them. She said, I don't care what relationship you have. If you want to leave or stay, my Spring Slumber Loft can't stop the three of you. But the expenses of the three of you can't be less than 1 spirit stone. Also, you have to pay for everything broken inside. Otherwise, don't blame me for reporting you to the World Chamber of Commerce. Hearing the words World Chamber of Commerce, the three men seemed to remember where they were and subconsciously let go. The woman who was dragged out quickly walked to the young woman's side and stared at one of the men. I have nothing to do with you. Don't come looking for me again. The man clenched his fists and said, Didn't you say that the Blue Palace disciple wanted to marry you? Why did he come here to do this? He raised his hand and pointed at Spring Slumber Loft's signboard. Humph, there's no good man. The woman said disdainfully. I said I have nothing to do with you. It's none of your business whether I do this or not. You have a good way out. I can't stop you. That's why I let you go. But if I knew you were here for this, I wouldn't have let you go. The man shouted, Where's that man? Where is he? Didn't he say he would take you to Blue Palace? Why did he let you do this? The woman giggled as if she had heard a funny joke. She shook her head and said, He's a Blue Palace disciple. Of course he's in Blue Palace. So what if I tell you? What can the three of you do to a Blue Palace disciple? Hearing this, the people around them had a rough idea of what was going on. There was a flurry of discussion. The general gist of it was that the two of them used to be a couple. Later, a Blue Palace disciple took a fancy to the woman and took her away. The Blue Palace disciple was probably just fooling around. When he got bored, he dumped the woman. In the end, the woman fell into this line of work. Yu Qianqiu knew of the Blue Palace. It seemed to be the territory of Pei Fong, the man whose hand Wen Lanfeng had cut off. Don't let me run into him, or I'll kill him, the man said fiercely. Haha, how arrogant. Someone in the crowd sneered. The person who spoke happened to be standing next to Yu Qianqiu. He walked up to the three people and said indifferently, I'm Lu Feng, and I happen to be a disciple of the Blue Palace. What did you just say? You want to kill a Blue Palace disciple? Say it again for me to hear. The three people turned around and stared at the person in front of them. They were so angry that their faces were red and their bodies trembled, but they didn't dare to say anything. There was a burst of laughter. They were laughing at the three people for overestimating themselves and talking big. Didn't they know that this was the World Chamber of Commerce? Did the Blue Palace also have business here? Yu Qianqiu slowly folded his arms. When he saw the faces of the three people, he remembered where he had seen them before. It was in Ghost Manor that he had talked back to Fang Ming. This protagonist who was so embarrassed that he couldn't show his face was called Tian Yi. He looked at them. Tian Yi was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and the two beside him were also in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. However, compared to Lu Feng, who was in the early stage of the tribulation passing realm, they were still a bit weaker. In addition, they were from the Blue Palace, so there must be more than one person here. If they fought, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly inside. Seeing that the three people didn't dare to speak, Lu Feng was even more pleased. He pointed at the woman and said, Isn't she just a wandering cultivator? My Blue Palace disciple is giving her face by messing with her. What? You three are not convinced? His words made the group burst into laughter again. The beautiful woman's expression changed. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. The disciples of the top 10 cultivators were so powerful that she couldn't afford to offend them. The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He thought to himself, Damn it! I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a despicable person. Even I don't dare to be so despicable. How dare she steal my limelight? I really can't stand it anymore. If I watch too much, I'll lose my appetite and lose face as a man. I'm a man, so I can't just stand by and watch. Yu Qianqiu nudged Yulan and Guan Zhongkai, who were in front of him. The two didn't know what he was going to do, but they still moved aside. He walked out expressionlessly and stood quietly behind Lu Feng. Everyone's eyes were on him. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. Amano and the other two looked over and were stunned. They had seen Niu Yud at Ghost Manor, so they naturally knew him, but they didn't expect to see him here. Seeing that everyone was looking over, Lu Feng thought that they were looking at him. He continued to be arrogant and proud. He pointed at Amano and the other two and said, How dare you say that you want to kill the Blue Palace disciple in public? I think you must be tired of living. Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt someone pat his shoulder from behind. As soon as he turned his head, his vision blurred. Then he heard a paw sound. His eardrums buzzed, and he felt a burning pain on his face. It was so painful that it was a little numb. Lu Feng staggered a few steps and shook his head to see clearly who had hit him. It was a middle-aged man with a smile on his face. He subconsciously asked, Who are you? Then he remembered that he had been hit in public. He immediately shouted angrily, You're courting death. Without another word, a blue flying knife flashed out of his pocket and directly shot towards the other party. Yu Qianqiu still looked at him with a smile on his face. The flying knife flew towards his chest, but he didn't dodge it. He just lightly flicked his finger at it. His movement was so casual that it was like he was chasing away a fly. With a clear ding sound, the blue knife paused in the air for a moment. Then, like a deflated balloon, it turned into sparkling blue powder and drifted to the ground. Chapter 593. Silence. It was really quiet. Everyone present was stunned. Those who were happily watching the show all opened their mouths wide. Lou Maple was even more dumbfounded. The magic artifact he used to attack his opponent had been turned into powder with a flick of his finger. Heavens! Who on earth was this guy? Just how high was his cultivation? He could actually shatter the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder with a flick of his finger. Isn't he a little too powerful? He was unbelievably strong. The chattering girls in the dormant spring house were as shocked as a flock of little quails. They had to sell themselves here, because their cultivation was not high. They had never seen such a high level of skill. The eyes of the lady boss, who was as beautiful as a flower, and had a graceful bearing, shone brightly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other, and saw the lingering fear in each other's eyes. Previously, they felt that the terrifying aura that Niu Yid used to suppress people was a bit unorthodox. It was too different from the aura emitted by most masters. Perhaps there was still a gap between his real cultivation and that of the top 10 masters. But this flick of his finger could be said to have shocked them in a dignified manner. He had shattered the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder. This was not something that could be achieved by opportunistic means. This was the real deal. There was no earth-shattering aura, nor was there any frightening noise. There was only a soft ding. It was hard to imagine how much power was contained in this flick of his finger. This level of cultivation had probably reached the legendary return to simplicity stage. They believed that with the cultivation of the top 10 masters, they could also shatter the magic artifact in Lou Maple's hand. But to shatter it into powder, the two of them couldn't help but wonder if the top 10 masters could do it. They had heard that Niu Yid had shown this skill in the Ghost Manor before, but the concept of shattering it was only limited to shattering it. It was not as terrifying as what they saw now. Too strong. The two of them looked at Niu Yid with more and more awe. This person was definitely a real top master. He is Niu Yid, someone in the crowd said weakly. Ah, he is the ruthless Judge Niu Yid? Many people couldn't help but exclaim. Nowadays, who hadn't heard of the ruthless Judge Niu Yid? This name was very famous in the cultivation world. Recently, the cultivation world was not at peace. It could be said that he was an extremely daring person. He even dared to swindle the spirit stones of the top 10 experts. It was said that he was a person who killed people without blinking an eye. The people who had formed a circle to watch the show subconsciously squeezed back. It was not a good thing to be too close to this guy. You are Niu Yid Senior Niu. Blue Maple's earlier arrogance had completely vanished, and he didn't dare to make the first move like he did earlier. Even though he had been beaten, his tone became a little more respectful. At this moment, what he was most worried about was whether Niu Yid would still make a move. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand dismissively and said, "Compared to your Blue Palace, this little bit of fame is not worth mentioning." Someone in the crowd snickered. What did he mean by saying that a little fame was not worth mentioning in front of the Blue Palace? You dared to beat up someone from the Blue Palace in front of everyone, and you still said it so modestly? Even the beautiful lady boss couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She stared at Yu Qianqiu with interest. Guan Zhongkai, on the other hand, openly smiled. Pei Fong had always been a sworn enemy of Grandmaster Yin Baikong. However, the World Chamber of Commerce did business with the people of the world, and their reputation was their priority. It was not good to find fault with them in cornucopia. Now that Niu Yid had made a move, it couldn't be any better. This guy was famous for being reckless. Others might be afraid of Fatty Pei, but he probably wouldn't be afraid. The truth had already been proven. The World Chamber of Commerce's law enforcement guards quickly swept over from the street. Guan Zhongkai flashed out and blocked their way. No one knew what he said to them, but they looked at each other and smiled. They all stood on the rooftops to watch the show, deciding not to enforce the law for the time being. Blue Maple saw the crowd's mocking eyes, and immediately blushed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, you are a contemporary expert. Why are you deliberately making things difficult for me?" "Fuck." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disdainfully and said, "You already said that I am a contemporary expert. Do you think I would deliberately make things difficult for you?" The crowd snickered again. They found that Niu Yid's words were a bit shameless. He really didn't have the demeanor of an expert. But when they thought about it, demeanor didn't seem to have anything to do with Niu Yid. "Then why did Senior hit me?" Blue Maple's tone became a bit tougher. After all, it was under the watchful eyes of the public. If he continued to weaken the Blue Palace's reputation, he was afraid that he wouldn't end up well when he returned. Yu Qianqiu said, "There's no other reason. I just couldn't help but want to slap you when I saw your cheap mouth. What do you have to say about that?" The crowd roared with laughter. Blue Maple immediately trembled with anger and said sternly, "Niu Yid, don't go too far. Do you really think that the disciples of the Blue Palace are so easy to bully?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "That's right. It's precisely because the disciples of the Blue Palace are not easy to bully that the female loose cultivators in the cultivation world suffer when they meet you. How dare you say that you're giving them face by playing with them in public? You're really shameless. You're a disgrace to all men. Damn it. If you want to play with them, then so be it. No one can control you. Why do you have to make it sound so disgusting and even show off? If I don't slap you, I can't eat or sleep well. I came here because I heard about your reputation. I want to see how easy it is to bully the disciples of the Blue Palace." His words. The group of women in the sleeping spring house were all heaving up and down. They seemed to be a little excited. The graceful lady boss stared at him silently, unblinking. You really want to openly provoke the Blue Palace?" Blue Maple had no choice but to use the name of the Blue Palace to pressure him again, hoping that the other party would back down. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and turned to stare at Amano and the others. He said, "Amano." Amano greets Senior Niu. Amano hurriedly came over and bowed. He seemed a little excited. He didn't expect such a person to remember his name. The other two also hurriedly came over and bowed. There was a soft murmur in the surroundings. From the way Niu Yid addressed them, it seemed that he knew these three people. The beautiful lady boss's eyes dimmed slightly. She thought that Niu Yid was standing up for the female cultivator who had been humiliated. But it turned out that he was doing it for these three people. The woman in pink next to her was the heroine of this matter. Her eyes lit up. It seemed that she didn't expect the three of them to know someone like Niu Yid. The expression on her face kept changing. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, "I didn't expect to see the three of you here after we parted ways at the Ghost Manor. It seems that we're really fated." "Yes." The three of them bowed. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. "Amano, I heard you say that you want to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Did I hear you correctly?" Yu Qianqiu said as he looked at Blue Maple. Blue Maple's expression changed. He felt that something was wrong. The people around them looked at each other in dismay. They could tell what was going on in his words. "Yes," Amano replied, but he seemed a little uneasy. "All right, I'll give you a chance." Yu Qianqiu raised his chin at Blue Maple and said, "The three of you go and kill him." Blue Maple was shocked and said sternly, "Niu Yid, you're openly going against the Blue Palace. My ancestor won't let you go." Then he shouted at Amano and the other two. "How dare you?" Amano and the other two hesitated. They didn't have the guts to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Unless they wanted to die in the future, that would be more likely. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three of them and said indifferently, "Where's the courage to cause trouble in the World Chamber of Commerce? I don't accept cowards as my subordinates." As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people looked at Amano and the other two enviously. What he meant was that if they killed Blue Maple, they would be his subordinates in the future. The three of them weren't fools. They naturally understood what he meant. As itinerant cultivators, they knew how rare this opportunity was. Even if they had to risk their lives, it would be worth it. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing of Ghost Manor were so glorious after they followed Niu Yid. They could order all the experts in the final stage of the tribulation stage around the world around. which made many itinerant cultivators envious. Something that could only be imagined in their dreams actually happened to them. The three of them looked at each other. They were in high spirits, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. If they didn't take this chance, they would be letting themselves down. So they nodded at each other. With flying swords in hand, they dashed forward and immediately surrounded Blue Maple in a triangular formation. "Try and touch me if you dare," Blue Maple threatened. A blue saber appeared in his hand again. He looked around as if he didn't want to fight and wanted to escape. "Kid, I'm here. If you dare to escape, I promise you'll die a horrible death," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. "If you can defeat the three of them, I'll spare your life. If you dare to escape, I'll kill you immediately." Blue Maple's face turned pale. He immediately dismissed the idea of escaping, because he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape from such a terrifying expert like Niu Yud. As his eyes drifted, he suddenly stopped and saw Guan Zhongkai in the crowd. He immediately said loudly, "Senior Guan, our Blue Palace does business in cornucopia and has paid all the taxes. We should enjoy the protection of the World Chamber of Commerce. Is the World Chamber of Commerce really going to turn a blind eye to it? Where is the credibility of the World Chamber of Commerce?" This accusation was too big. Guan Zhongkai's expression changed, and he waved to the roof. The law enforcement guards flashed to the middle and surrounded Blue Maple. The latter was slightly relieved. He wasn't afraid of Tian Yi and the other two, but Niu Yud. The other side was clearly determined to kill him. If such an expert played any tricks during the fight, he probably wouldn't even know how he died. At this moment, 5 or 6 people in blue clothes appeared out of nowhere and flashed to the scene. They also protected Blue Maple. Blue Maple glanced at them and silently gritted his teeth. He couldn't say anything at this time, but he was well aware that these fellow disciples had been nearby just now. They probably didn't dare to come out when they saw Niu Yud looking for trouble with the Blue Palace. Now that the World Chamber of Commerce's people had stepped forward, they appeared one by one. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.